Hi guys, I'm back with part 2 of Addy's quilt comparisons, and I wanted to talk about the history of just Addy's story and quilting and where that actually comes from, using scraps and patterns to create something new, and how it took a whole bunch of innovative people to really get the process going as far as quilting, and using the whole story of quilting throughout Addy's line of books and literature for American Girl. So this is part of her book. This is Changes for Addy. So you can see that that's book 6. And throughout the book, it just has little snippets of illustrations that feature quilts. And you can probably even guess that Addy's mother learned how to quilt from Auntie Lula. And so the story is just very rich in African American history when it comes to quilting. Another story, such as Happy Birthday, Addy. It talks about just everything that Addy had going for her, such as the rationale of why a bird sings while it's being caged. And a lot of times you'll even wonder for birds to sing like they do, and you know, they're free and whatnot, what it's like for a bird to be caged up. So Addy's story addresses that. So it's really nice to see little snippets of like the yellow birds in Addy's quilts to remind us that such a bird was in her story, and for her to ask questions about what it's like to have that experience of not being free but still wanting to sing out. And talking about birds and singing also brings us back to how African Americans during the time of slavery, some slaves were educated and could read very well and write very well, and some were very much illiterate. And you also had free African Americans as well. And so with African Americans being free, they had the mindset and the freedom to still continue to educate themselves and to do things that were part of the African American community that a lot of slaves could not participate in. Like, some African Americans had bazaars, and they had fairs, street fairs and church fairs that allowed them to sell their goods and products, such as quilts and other things that they would make with their hands. Addy's father ends up making, I think, puppets at a church fair that they sell to raise money for the Freeman's Bureau. So that was going to help send a lot of free slaves to the North to be reunited with their families. So again, you had the strong sense of family. I'll show you guys also not just the Addy books. This is not just for the Addy books, but you can also find quilting and other pieces of literature as well. And I'll show you some other resources that you guys can use with Addy's story collection. This is a book called African American Literature, and it's a book that's full of short stories written by African American authors. And this book is really nice. I had this book in college, so it's not a brand new book. And so one of the stories that I can't wait to read is actually called Quilting on the Rebound. And so that, again, shows you how popular quilting was and still is to African American literature. This book also came with a CD. So part of the CD plays spirituals and gospel songs like Go Down Moses, Been in the storm so long, didn't my Lord deliver Daniel? And you can let me know if you've heard of some of these. Like Steal Away to Jesus, I've heard of. Soon I Will Be Done by Mahalia Jackson, who's my mother's favorite singer, so I've heard that song. Take My Hand, Precious Lord is always a popular church hymn. And Rosie is a work song that a lot of the slaves sung on the plantation to get their work done faster and take their mind off of troubles. Another Man Done Gone, John Henry, that's a popular story in African American literature, and it's actually a tall tale legend as well. You May Go, but This Will Bring You Back. That sounds a little bit daunting, so I hope it's upbeat and not downtrodden. I hope. But then it goes into blues, and so how jazz and blues, the backbone of that started with spirituals that African Americans used to sing on the plantation and in churches and places of worship. So that's another thing that can go with Addy's story. And again, I'm bringing this up because American Girl is trying to retire Addy, and they're trying to tell people that Addy's story is no longer relevant. It's too sad for American children to learn nowadays. And if you're taking history, or if your parents and teachers expect you to go to college, in college they have history. You cannot get away from American U.S. history. This is actually an AP American literature book. And so if you plan on, taking AP courses, it's in AP as well. So I don't really agree with the same argument about how slavery and Addy's story is too harsh, because it's just a part of our history. So there's no escaping it. Like, this is an AP book, and it has incidents in a slave life. In a slave girl. Incidents in the life of a slave girl. So not only will you read short stories like this that talk about Addy's experience through another person's point of view, who was a real person, where Addy, she's fictitious. She is, a character, and Pleasant Rowland just happened to create a doll that went with the Addy Walker character for the Pleasant Company American Girl collection. But in this book, you're going to have questions like, Jacob writes, I was a poor slave girl, only 15 years old. How does knowledge of her age affect your response to the narrative? So you're going to be asked a lot of questions that are going to have you analyze what slavery was really like for a person. So you don't have to be African American. You don't have to have been a slave or have someone in your family who came from a descendant of a slave. Sometimes you have to think, what could that life have been like? What would that mean for someone like me who, maybe that institution was just too much for you to even think about. But this actually happened. So, American Girl did us a big, huge favor by introducing this to a lot of young people in the story of Addy. So if you think Addy's story is too harsh, then you're definitely not going to like American literature when you get to high school and college. And you're not going to like U.S. history, because U.S. history was founded, a lot of the information that you'll get from the White House, the White House was built on the backs of slaves, and a lot of Southern agriculture had American slavery intertwined in the agriculture. So you're going to have to embrace this kind of literature soon, sooner rather than later. So I really think that American Girl needs to still continue the Addy collection, just for the significance that you really can't be the kind of person who's going to avoid it for your whole entire life. Because if you want to be knowledgeable, if you want to go to college, if you want to become a doctor or lawyer, you still have to know how to analyze questions and how to answer questions on your own, without the aid of other people telling you what to think and how to think. So these are just little things that I've picked up reading Addy's story, and I'll show you something on a child's level that I use with the youngest member of my family. Okay, in my family we love Jerry Pickney. Everything and anything Jerry Pickney we absolutely love. So Little Red Riding Hood is definitely a favorite amongst us, and I think my favorite is actually, I'm skipping a page that I want to show you guys, and it's this one right here. You can clearly see the chest, the bed frame, and the quilt. And look at how detailed that is. So again, you're going to have little features of quilts interwoven in literature, whether it's African American literature or whether it's U.S. history. So I want you guys just to consider that when you're buying Addy's collection. Just urge American Girl to continue with the Addy collection, because even though we have melody now, that's not a substitute for American history, U.S. history, with the Civil War and with American slavery. And that even has a lot to do with economics as well. So just, encourage American Girl to still continue teaching real history, and to definitely educate yourself as well. All right, talk to you guys later.